Which is the most haunting deathbed confession you know of? 1. There was a couple where the wife got some mental illness where she wouldn't go outside the house. This went on for years. Eventually, after counseling, she made a little progress and agreed to go to the drugstore one night. She went in while her husband stayed in the car. While she was in the drugstore, someone walked in, shot her in the back of the head, and walked out. She died immediately and the shooter was never caught. For years everyone thought it was some insane paranormal thing, like she somehow knew that being out in public would lead to her death, etc. Many decades later, the husband admitted on his deathbed that he had hired someone to delete her because he could not take her mental illness anymore. 2. My stepfather requested to see the 2 other families he had that nobody knew about on his deathbed. Boy, was that fun. 3. My wife is a CNA in a nursing home. She had a resident who was formerly a delivery, OB, nurse in the 70s and 80s. When she was on her last few breaths, my wife was leaning into her face to clean it, and she whispered in my wife's ear, "When I was a nurse, I switched babies around." I'm not sure what's worse, knowing that one child may not be your child, or that this woman could have done it many times. 4. My great-great-uncle admitted on his deathbed that he wasn't actually related to our family. He'd spent the last 40 years in the US using one of our distant relatives' citizenship papers since they looked close enough, and in the 1920s that was really all you needed. He didn't delete the real uncle or anything. The guy had just decided America wasn't for him and went home. This dude was like, "Hey, since you don't want to go back, can I have your papers?" And that was that. Not haunting at all. But my family doesn't have very many deathbed confessions, so it's still technically the most haunting. 5. My grandmother confessed to me that I was adopted. What haunts me is that her dementia was so bad that she legitimately believed I didn't know. For context, I'm Korean, my sister's Mexican and our parents are white. I spent the last few hours with her letting her act as if she were breaking it to me gently and promising I wouldn't be upset with my parents for not telling me, even though they had, and it was kinda hard to miss. 6. My grandfather revealed that my mother was not his only child. In the 1950s, when his longtime best friend was unable to impregnate his wife, my grandfather spent a week, in a remote cabin in the Ozarks having intimacy with this guy's wife in order to give them a child. He said they had intimacy over 20 times. His friend even walked in on them once having intimacy on the kitchen counter after he drove down for the day to check on them. No phone at the cabin. Well, the week of intimacy worked and she got pregnant. The couple then moved out of state to start a new life as a family. To this day it is their only child and she's not aware of her biological dad. The only communication my grandfather received from them afterward was a letter giving confirmation the child was born a healthy little girl. He never saw his friend again, but stated he often thought about that cabin in the woods. 7. When I was in hospital, the guy in the bed next to me just asked to stop taking his meds as he was ready to die. Last thing I heard him say was, "There's no one waiting for me at home, so I'm going where they are." Wasn't really a shocking confession, just a lonely and heartbreaking one. 8. My wife's grandmother called her husband over to her and said something along the lines of, "I've hated you for decades. You are a racist, controlling bastard." She died a few minutes later. He went down to the cafeteria and got lunch. 9. Reading these is crazy. All my grandpa said on his deathbed was, "Can someone turn off that smell after I open my breakfast burrito?"